welcome to the Word and Journey podcast. Conversations with friends about stories that shape us and make us think, and some stories that are just for fun. We're busy people reading books in realistic increments. Follow along in the book and join in the conversation, or just sit back and enjoy. Our aim is to unpack the story and offer you things to ponder. Either way, thanks for being here. Hello, audience. I hope there's an audience. Welcome back to the Word and Journey podcast, stories that shape us and make us think. And sometimes they're movie adaptations as well. So I'm here back in the studio with Joel Sommer, the poet extraordinaire from here in Portland, Oregon. And when this is released, we will have just concluded our series reading through Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Which in real time, we actually recorded it quite a few months before recording this one, but I'm going to release them all at once, so you don't have to go through any of our turmoil. So you will have now read the book by Oscar Wilde and heard our discussion about it. And now we are going to talk about one of the movie adaptations of it from, I forget the date, like 2010, 2012-ish or so, with Ben Barnes and Colin Firth, and a few others. And so we watched the movie. So now we're comparing, contrasting the movie and the book, best we remember the book, and offering commentary on the movie as its own piece. So that is that. Otherwise, yes. How are you, Joel?
I'm doing well. It's been a nice. It's Sunday evening here, so it's been a good weekend filled with a nice mixture of responsibility and relaxation. So I'm in good standing here and excited to talk about Dorian Gray and this movie. Which there's a lot. There's I can't speak to them all, but I think there was like 4 or 5 different movies, and this is the most recent 2000. Would you say 2009, 2010, something like that?
Somewhere in there, right around that era, about 10 years ago or so, a little bit more. Yeah, I didn't research super closely all of the history of movie adaptations, although I imagine with a story this old, there would by now be a couple. And yes, this is the only one that I've seen, and I think it is the most recent. There was, and I think I mentioned this in the book series, there was the Sean Connery ensemble classic like 20 years ago, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and it was sort of a Victorian England era, like Avengers sort of thing, like kind of like the Victorian Justice League. It was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and some vampire, and like Lestat from the Interview with the Vampire series, I think, and a couple others. And Dorian Gray was featured there, and he was one of those characters in there where like you didn't quite know where his loyalties were, and he ended up being an antagonist, and so him and his relationship to his portrait were featured there, and that was kind of my introduction to who he was as a character. But I don't think that counts as like really encountering the story. It's more like an adaptation of a mutation of a trope, inspired by this interesting character. So briefly narrating, once again, in case you haven't read the book, we will be spoiling everything. So spoiler alert, official spoiler alert. You've been informed, now consent. So Dorian Gray is an Englishman. He's young, he's rich, he's beautiful. And according to his friend Lord Henry Wotton, he has everything that matters. He has youth and good looks, and he encounters an artist named Basil who paints a painting of him, and it's apparently the best painting this artist has ever done, and a really, really impressive painting. And in a supernatural way that is not ever fully explained, the Dorian develops a peculiar symbiosis with this painting where the painting ages, but he doesn't. And the painting now takes on the weight of all of Dorian's sins, all of his burdens, everything he does that is untoward or evil or bad for him, has no effect on his physical body, but it does contribute to the decline of the painting itself. And so in that arrangement, then the story follows Dorian as he now lives in that reality of nothing can touch me. What will I do with this? And his escapades from there. That and there's a culmination to that which we'll get to. But along the way, there's some broken hearts, some depths, and some really wonderful dialogue, and I guess a lot of sex and drugs too. So there's that. This movie's not rated G. And I don't know. Well, I guess what we could talk about this at the end. We'll ask the question like, would you let your kids watch this? But anyway, there's that. So that's the very very brief synopsis. But yeah, just jumping into like just start watching the movie. Joel, what were some of your just like first impressions of the movie as a movie?
The movie as a movie, well, let me start with some good thoughts. I thought that Colin Firth was pretty captivating on screen. I liked his presence, and that's Colin Firth playing Lord Henry. What was the name of the actor that played Dorian?
Ben Barnes, who
Ben Barnes.
sometime before that was Prince Caspian. So
okay, I wasn't familiar with. I do love those Narnia books. I don't know if I've seen any of the movies. Maybe we could discuss that in a different episode. But first impressions, I thought the moods were pretty good, like pretty good lighting, and I felt like I was in the world of early or late 20th century type of England, with the riches and the parties. As the movie went on, I was feeling more and more disappointed, I guess, at the lack of depth. I think explained like through the character interactions, and sort of like I saw some of the elements, and we can get into this in more specific, but just sort of like there's a triangle, I feel like, in the book between Basil and Lord Henry and Dorian, and that exists certainly in the movie, but I feel like that kind of carries sort of the love triangle there, or relationship triangle, kind of carries the book in a much more substantial way than was in the movie. Yeah, those are some initial impressions.
Yeah, thank you. I would agree generally on the prettiness of the film. I mean, yeah. Anytime you get to see characters brought to life and depicted, and hear tones of voice, and it's fun. It's fun seeing them come to life. But as is often the case in a movie adaptation, the depth often isn't there. And I think you're right in the triangle between Dorian, Lord Henry, and Basil. That was really pronounced, and I feel like the character Basil was also much better developed in the book as well. Like he really got, and again, I don't think his character was misrepresented per se. Although the sexual connections between Basil and Dorian didn't exist in the book at all. But there, Basil, he's this artist. There definitely is this thread of him being kind of obsessive, and he obsesses over Dorian and over the beauty of the boy, the man, and he's kind of obsessive, but then he starts to kind of like come out of that and get kind of a sense for like something's up here, and something's not good. So for the characters, some of the adaptations to the characters were really interesting. So the Lord Henry character in the book, he's very much aloof and very much like I don't give a blank about anything except my own self, and I just make fun of everything, and I'm super cynical, and like I don't really believe in anything. I womanize, I sexualize, I objectify, and basically look at the world not only as my oyster but also my plaything, and y'all exist specifically for my entertainment. And he kind of lives vicariously through Dorian, and it's kind of he's kind of the, and if we do like the angel and the demon on the shoulder, Basil very much tries to become Dorian's conscience, or the voice of Dorian's conscience, and Lord Henry is very definitely the enabler, the voice that says like, here's all of these fun, mischievous ways you can act out, and never mind the cost or what harm it does to other people. And in the movie, that I think that is depicted pretty well. But then Lord Henry's arc in the movie gets really interesting because he starts to change, or he starts to like back away from that. Like, for instance, in the movie, they create a daughter for him. Like, that character I don't think was in the book at all. But then in the movie, Lord Henry has a daughter who's like just being born at the start of it, and then when there's the 25-year passage of time, now she's an adult, and she and Dorian have a thing. So uh so that, I mean, that wasn't in the book at all, but because of that, I feel like that changes Lord Henry's character quite a bit, and it really changes how he relates to Dorian as well. Like in the book, they were pretty much always on the same page, the same thread. But they start to, in the movie, they start to have more conflict, and I think that making Lord Henry into like actually a family man, I think that really had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I think plot wise in changing that might be the biggest thing. There was like a few small things that I noticed, but that him kind of becoming a family man versus yeah, kind of just continuing to be the enabler, and then also the kind of sexual relationship between Basil and Dorian kind of changed Basil a little bit, and he was trying to, I don't know, be more of a conscious. And then he still says like, "Let's destroy the painting. We can do it." And then he kills him. So yeah, but yeah, and then they kind of substitute in the book. Dorian kind of falls for this like younger like girl that works at like a farmhouse when they're out of town, and they kind of do this substitute where Lord Henry's daughter kind of becomes this, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna have that one chance to do it right, but then it's like kind of more stinging because it's Lord Henry's daughter, and he like hasn't aged at all, so that's like kind of the weird thing. To shift gears just slightly, the other thing I thought was kind of, maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe you disagree or might disagree, but like the fact that the painting was alive more and it had like bugs crawling out of it, and like it, even like the painting tries to say something, and also the painting I think he heals him. Like he comes in with like a broken wrist or something, so it's like definitely a little bit more alive, I guess.
It's a little souped
I
up.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that, and it was interesting. It was interesting because at least on Amazon Prime, the movie's classified, as drama and suspense, but also as a horror film. And I mean, personally, I don't see that. Maybe I'm twisted in my own head, but I started to wonder, like, well, so what is it that they're seeing in this movie that they consider like horrific in that way? And I wonder if it is like what they do with the painting, because I mean, it does get kind of creepy. I mean, he's like, yeah, growing maggots and groaning and everything. On a conceptual level, though, I mean, and we might talk about this more later, but you're wondering, so what was the truly horrifying aspect of the story? Was it that this painting becomes so decaying, disgusting, or was the truly horrific thing like, here's this man who's been given a chance at an invincible, immortal life, and like, look what he does with it. Um, Although that's like straying out of like the cinematography, like deep into the concept of it. Um, but yeah, I guess say more. So making the painting gross and maggoty and alive like it was, do you feel like that um, enhanced or detracted from the concept of what was going on?
I think I was a little confused. And at a certain point in watching the movie, I think maybe when you watch any adaptation, you should go into it with being like, okay, I'm going to try to give this a fresh shot. This is an adaptation and not like not going to be the exact same thing. And I think that's when the maggot like crawled out, and the I thought one of the cheesiest parts was like the painting actually was like rawr or something, like it like said something, and I was like, no, don't do that, please. But yeah, I think I guess a couple of kind of showing it pulsing and showing it alive, I think was in more taste with the psychological horror aspect, and then showing like bugs living behind it. Um, didn't really add to kind of the mystery of like the curse or like the promise that he made that kind of created this magic oath. And the fact that it like healed him, I was sort of like, wow, now he's like Wolverine. Like this painting, like he can just absorb, he's invincible, which I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, um, I mean, at that point when I saw that, I wasn't trying to overthink it, but I was like, I thought that took it a little too far. I guess like he's not like he can't get shot and then like he's still gonna die. I don't know. Yeah, so that took that a little further than
Mm-hmm.
I thought needed to be.
It was interesting, and so getting into like what he does with this. So yeah, I guess that's not in the book specifically that the portrait heals him physically. I mean, it does seem like the book really camps on what we might even call more like the spiritual aspect of it. Of it's his sins and the burden of his sins that are being put on the painting. And I can't remember if they specifically use like sin language, but if it's more like that sort of thing. It's not talking as much about, oh, I got stabbed in the hand or I got cut across the cheek and now that's healing. Or one example is he had scars on his back from childhood beatings that disappeared in the course of things. Um, but it does kind of change a little bit how Dorian experiences what the painting can do for him. Because it seems like in the movie, then because he's like physically impervious to that, kind of his acting out escapades kind of take on a particular flavor. Like it's like these really physically reckless, risky things. Like in one of the montage, I mean, so there's a lot. So he has a lot of hookups and does a lot of drugs in those, which that's also I think talked about in the books. But he starts getting into like the really like aggressive and violent situations. Like there's one scene of him like getting in one of his sexual escapades, like getting punched and like getting wounded and things, and then in when he's running and fleeing from people, he can't get hurt. So I'll be curious your take on this too. So in the book, it talks about him doing all of these things, and I'm trying to remember. And I know we paused on this point at one point because there's a chapter really capturing his passage of time where it's talking about how he traveled all over the world and collected all of these items and all of these things and ate all of this rich food and had all of these really rich experiences. And there's kind of implied that there's sex happening. There's a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, but it's kind of more. I kind of feel like there's implied a more broad King Solomon esque approach to pleasure, where it's like everything that was set before me, I took, and it does encompass a lot of life. In the movie, it basically paints him as this drug addict, this chemsex, drug and sex addict, like you might expect, like your conventional stereotypical like rock star in America. Like they hit their fame stride and then their downward spiral is I have a lot of sex, I do a lot of drugs, and not necessarily like killing people, not necessarily like sampling like all of the pleasures of the world, but really just like I'm living living some of my life on the stage and like the other part of my life like in the back alley or in the brothel. um so kind of, and it kind of felt like I don't know, what's your take on those montages depicting what Dorian does?
Well, I think maybe I'm hoping for too much, but the book, when it sort of just hints at like Dorian, in the book, he's walking into rooms and ladies are running away and like people are like talking about him behind his back, and you kind of have that, and it sort of felt like it was a Hollywood kind of like just let's use sex to sell this a little bit. And I didn't think I thought some of it could have gotten by with like good taste, but I think in just the taste of the movie, it kind of went over the top. because all that stuff in the book about his lecherous lifestyle and stuff, certain things kind of were held in more of a philosophical like a bent that's like feeding the painting, and that's where like the energy is going, like less showing like the individual hearts that are being broken and the manipulations. I want to hold that but pivot slightly to back what you said about the scars. Remind me, I wanted to bring up that I don't think this was part of the book at all, that the room where he kept the painting in the movie, it showed these flashbacks to like he was like beaten there, I think. And so the movie kind of introduced this theme of like, maybe his addict and sort of evil urges were sort of tied to this house a little bit, like beyond the painting, into this room, and to I wasn't clear to me whether it was like the uncle that had lived there that was beating him, or who it was that had given him the scars on his back. But it's sort of, I guess I was confused in the movie because it sort of humanizes him as a character to like kind of have this rationale to his bad behavior versus sort of just being corrupted by Lord Henry giving him the red book, or was it a yellow book, whatever, that just kind of like this world, this life of passion. So yeah, so all that, all those montages mixed with sort of this kind of not explained backstory of the room kind of made me just made less sense just taking the movie on its own. And maybe I should let you respond, but another question that comes up to my mind is like, could you really get the meaning of the book from the movie, like if you hadn't read the book at all and just watched the film alone? Is sort of a question that I'm wondering.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. Like, does the movie express also what the book wanted to express? I'm gonna have to ponder that. But backing up again. So what you notice about the scars and the grandfather? I think it was a grandfather. It might have been a father, but I noticed that too, and it really changed the character of Dorian. In the movie, you can kind of see him as, oh, this like traumatized boy who like never quite grew up, and he kind of got stuck in this like, I need to prove myself, I need to act out sort of phase. So it's happens for a lot of people. So it's kind of a real and true to life sort of thing. And then now with the addition of this painting, he's like enabled in that and is able to like take that way beyond what would normally happen. But in the book, he's an orphan, but you don't get the sense that he was abused or anything. And I think what that does is, it in the book it portrays it much more as, this is who he is. This is his inherent nature, or more natural to him, not just a traumatized victim response to something, which does change the character, because you're right. And let's not talk about the ending just yet, but when we get there, I think what we're talking about, he's humanized more in the movie, and that changes the power of the ending a lot. In the book, he's this human character, but his nature is a lot crisper, I think, as, yeah, just kind of this like lecherous hedonist sort of guy. And sure, we can blame a good bit of that on Lord Henry, but I mean, he's really open to being shaped that way also. I know I was really struck by this idea of like, this question of like, who's the real Dorian? Is it the person, or is it the painting? And the way the characters handle it, the way Oscar Wilde writes about it, it's blurred. It's really blurred, and you almost do get the sense of like, uh, the painting is Dorian's soul, and so is the real him. Well, I know we kind of talked about the different, the compare and contrast, Dorian and his image to like a saint in their icon. Is that you can't really fracture yourself that way, or if you try to fracture yourself, or if you try to disconnect from your burdens and what you do, that ends up like destroying you, or it ends up like isolating you more. I'm trying to think back. I think that theme was pretty strong in the book, and I know here in the movie, I mean, it was definitely getting that sense too of there's a sense of he's got these burdens and that are all getting put on this painting, and it's ends up being really isolating for him, and because like he can't bring them out or show them or tell anyone about them, and he's always got this thing that he's hiding. Like that's part of what destroys him. An interesting question we could think conceptually, like if something were to have happened in the story, I mean, this would completely change the story, but if Dorian were to have been saved in some way, like what would have been the move by him or by someone else to like pull him out of the cycle and actually like save him? I'm curious what you think there.
Okay, just so I understand, what would need to happen in this, or if something happened in the story where he was saved, how would that fundamentally change kind of what the themes of the
Yeah.
book are about
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously would completely change
and the
the
movie?
nature of the story, but like who would need to do what, or what would have needed to happen in the story world if Dorian were to have been saved out of all of this?
That's a big question. I guess where my mind goes is like, Basil isn't he doesn't murder him. He almost murders him, and then they fracture, and then Dorian keeps going down his ways, and then he realizes that he has to do something, and then he starts amending his ways, and then he starts to see the painting, um, maybe like do some reversing, I guess, on what he's seen, and then yeah, maybe they just like meet somehow, like meet in the middle, and then it's ultimately the same ending. I don't know. I'm just riffing here.
But yeah, no, I get it. I mean, it's entirely theoretical because it's not the story, and it would have been a completely different story. But so to me, as a counselor, as a trauma counselor, now watching this, I'm thinking, okay, so if Dorian's character were to have been saved at some point, yeah, not murdering Basil would have been a good start. But I think beyond that, it has to do with the painting and the way that he hides it away. Really scared of what happens if someone sees the painting, because it's the sense of like what happens if someone sees me. And in the movie, this definitely comes out where he's like, I've seen my soul. He confesses to the priest, and it's gross and despicable, and help me. But then he can't stand the idea of someone seeing it, and I feel like that would have been the thing that would have saved him, is if he could have let someone see it, and if that person then could have also still seen him, or chosen to maybe validate the reality of, okay, that's the painting, that's your soul, that's your burden, but also here's the you, here's the embodied you, and let's fix this in a way. And I guess in the movie, I would say in the movie, the fabricated character of Lord Henry's daughter would have probably been the most likely able to do that. Um, but that, again, that wasn't the story. So that's a completely theoretical tangent based on what I think actually happens in real life. Like when we're carrying significant burdens, what tends to be really healing is when we can bring them out and share them and connect with people and not live in isolation. And I've riffed on this many times, why isolation is really bad for us, and why being in community and being fully known is actually really good for us. It's really terrifying and it can be really gross, but gross in the way of like, oh, I have to like pop this blister and then bandage it, and then now I can heal, that sort of thing.
No, that's a really cool a cool point, and helps me remember some of our discussions about the book. But I think you could see, even not in the alternate universe we just talked about, but you could see as Lord Henry's daughter as kind of like his last chance to be saved, for him to be like, hey, come into this inner chamber, look at my soul. And he can't do it. He's like, he doesn't kill her, but I think the movie makes it seem like he would, or like what, I don't remember what happens. Does Henry like kind of come in and save her or something? Something bad's about to happen.
So Dorian has a nightmare of Emily stealing his key. Emily's the daughter. He has a nightmare of her stealing the key, going up, and he strangles her as a result. And then he wakes up and he realizes she's still in bed with him, and so that didn't happen. And so there's that. But it's definitely his capacity to do that sort of thing. I mean, that's what he did to Basil, poor Basil. So,
Do you think the fact that he put Basil in a trunk and like pushed him into the water had any significance? I was thinking it could have been coincidence. That's the way Sybil, kind of the same area that Sybil Vane jumped into. Or they just wanted to avoid the complications of him calling in the doctor to like liquefy the body. And maybe this makes me sound like a creep, but like that was one of my favorite parts of the
yeah,
book, at least the creepy parts, is where he like manipulates this guy, like an old, like he calls in a favor of a friend and it's like, hey, I'm gonna rat you out on your secrets if you don't like use your chemistry skills to like liquefy this body. And that part's not in the movie, but I was like
right.
kind of hoping it was gonna be.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Like, well, like, I mean, in the movie, I mean, looking at the similar location, I mean, we could call that, oh, yeah, it's a depiction of trauma reenactment of a sort. Like, he's just like inevitably drawn to this particular spot in the river. I mean, and/or is just this more likely, like, it was a movie making device to, you cut out a character, you streamline things. It was it was a way of disposing of a body that's a little bit more in our collective consciousness that wouldn't need to be explained, and we'd recognize that more easily. But now that you mention it, though, I remember how it was in the book. Yes, calling in. So there's this whole other character that gets called in, and that hints at Dorian's more scandalous nature. Like they have like these rifts, and there was a scandal that was unresolved, which again kind of captures more of Dorian's character as this person who uses people. And yeah, like there's this chemist like dissolves the body and gets rid of it, which feels shocking in a way to think about, or is just really staggering, or just like the sense of like Basil is completely gone now. There's no trace of him, and Dorian just like eliminated this person essentially out of his life, out of the world, and nobody knows how or why. And there's just like a starkness to that, like a really like unyielding reality to that that's just like stunning. Like nobody gets closure. In the movie, I mean, he cuts up the body, but it gets found later. So people eventually kind of find out, oh, Basil is dead now. That's where he's gone. We can do grief now, which again in real life that's healthier when that can happen because you can have the closure. But I think that because in the book Dorian handles this in a way that doesn't give anyone closure and it doesn't let anyone heal from it. Um, that just like magnifies this character so much more. So yeah, I guess in the end, I'm kind of disappointed they didn't go with like the super super creepy, uh, you know, chemist. What's the word? Undertaker, chemist, Undertaker. Yeah.
Well, not that they didn't go super gross ways with like the sexuality part, like where
Mm.
he's like at this party and then he's like getting this young girl drunk and then like kind of seducing her mom at the same time.
Yeah. That was another moment that felt just like super super over the top. Which again, in a movie making world, like you're needing to really clearly portray the nature of a character as quickly as possible. So I mean that sort of one and done scene definitely captures that. And in this case too, you get the sense of Dorian being the result of his culture, because this whole thing is it's a bet between him and Lord Henry. Like, can you get the girl in bed? You know, why not? Why can you get her mom also? Uh, uh, and so Dorian, so in that story, he's not acting completely on his own. He's very much under the influence of his best friend. And for me, that speaks of Dorian as being very much like the product of his culture, um, which again doesn't kind of doesn't alleviate him from any responsibility, but it serves to humanize him a little bit more and just kind of build this theme of like, oh, you were traumatized as a kid, you had bad friends, you had this, you know, wealth of experience that you weren't ready for, you had all of this money that you weren't properly taught to manage. Oh, poor Dorian. So sad you turned out to be a creep, and a really violent one too. Um, so, but yeah, I guess it was kind of a over the top scene.
How can you imagine watching this movie if you didn't know anything about the book beforehand?
Mm-hmm.
Would you
I don't know I don't know that I'd be interested in the book, honestly. Because I think in the movie I would see, oh, here's this pretty boy having all of this sex and having these hookups and it's like making really bad relationship choices. And here's this gross painting. And um, I'm thinking if I just saw the movie, I might miss the significance of what's happening with the painting because of the, just like the spectacle of like all of the other drama. Possibly, they did a pretty good job, I think, explaining what it was. And there's and especially toward the end, like Dorian's talking more about like this painting is my soul, and it's heavy, and I'm tired, and I want to be rid of it. But I don't know, but if I was just watching the movie and especially watching it all in one shot, and like both times I watched the movie, I broke it up a couple times, so I didn't quite get the full impact. I think by the time I got to the end where he's like really getting into like the heart of the story, I would have been just like kind of overwhelmed by it. I was just like, okay, I've been watching this like stream of hedonism for an hour, and now I'm supposed to be interested in my soul. Uh, no thanks. How about for you? Like, if the movie was all you knew, where would you go with that?
Well, I hate to say, I know this isn't about good or bad, but I think the movie would be even less tolerable because I'm not able to fill in maybe some of the gaps that make the story more interesting. Another thing that just occurred to me is I don't think we've touched on Jim yet. I mean, there's a couple small differences from the book to the movie. I think, like in the movie, he knows uh, Dorian's identity. Like, I think in the book, he's just Prince Charming and kind of like anonymous. And then after Sybil, his sister, commits suicide, he comes after Dorian in the movie, like to his house, like with a gun. Or does he have a gun? I think so.
In the movie, he
Um,
does.
yeah. And then again, he appears a little bit in Hollywood style, like they're both going to visit her grave at the same time, and then he does this part that's similar to the book where Dorian convinces him that's like, "What a man with this face, could I be the same person I look like I did 20 years ago?" And he doesn't kill him versus getting killed in a. I think he gets killed in a hunting accident in the book, and then in the movie he's like slammed by a subway. So I can't quite articulate it, but there's a difference that Jim kind of represents not just like Dorian's sins coming to like execute justice, but like sort of like also the haunting of like Sybil and kind of this first sin that just like, kind of started paving the way. And maybe I'm being too nitpicky, but that's what like a good classic piece of literature can do is create these like motifs that like all kind of fit together. And the movie, for whatever it is, on its own, just can't, draw those same kind of vibes and conclusions. So that's what I say.
I appreciate the nitpick because I mean that's what we do here. I'm trying to think what stood out about the relationship with Jim in the movie. They kind of had to like it felt like they thought they needed to make it into an action flick in some way, and so here was the opportunity for a chase scene. Let's have the angry, vengeful but highly uninformed Jim, chase Dorian through the subway, and you get to really see Dorian's really fabulous long coat, which I'd really like a coat like that. Um, and in the movie, it was a little bit more subtle, a little bit more like back alley, like this is between us two, and it kind of presents Jim more as like stalking him and accidentally getting killed in a hunting accident as a result, rather than directly challenging him. So there's a little bit of a difference there, for sure. Yeah, I'm thinking about kind of the relationship with Sybil in general as it happened. I mean, it took up a good chunk of the movie. I feel like proportionally, it took up a little bit more of the movie than it took up in the book. But still, still has some impact. It's still, yeah, that first sin, that first destruction, that Dorian enacts, that, yeah, mostly gets forgot about for decades until Dorian's now back in town, and Jim hasn't forgotten. But okay, I think they kind of represented what that relationship was pretty decently well, if not a little accelerated. because everything in the movie is a little accelerated from the
Yeah,
pace
I
that
agree with
it's.
you. Actually, in that civil vein, in the same vein, if you will.
Good one.
The I didn't particularly like the way they broke up in the movie, like how she was just like, I envision having kids, and that's what causes him to snap or whatever she says, and then it's just like over. But the part after she dies, I thought reflected the kind of same feelings I had when I read the book, where he's just like distraught and then just like over it, like really quickly. And yeah, I thought that worked well in the movie.
Mhm.
That scene.
I think so. Yeah, I already forgotten a bit about the kids part because I don't think that was as big in the book. I think in the book it was more of like, oh, this is inconvenient, or I don't want to break her heart, which again, and kind of portraying Dorian as a more callous character in the book. And again, Lord Henry's got his fingerprints all over it. Uh, so
Yeah,
it's like,
in the movie they kind of go to this brothel beforehand, and then she like kind of just senses that he's different, and it's like a little less believable. To be honest, I don't remember exactly how his motivations in the breakup went, but yeah, I think you're right. Lord Henry kind of like, pushed him to believe you'll
mhm,
love again, there'll be others.
mhm,
And he just
yeah. Or in the
oh, there
book,
was
it
a
was.
part, oh, she also stops acting well. Like after she was just like, I can't ever,
Mhm,
I won't ever do a good performance again out of like,
mhm,
because I know true love for love's sake. Oh my
yeah.
gosh, that's yeah.
Yeah, and then he's really disappointed in her because he, I guess, like loved the fantasy or the idea of her more than the actual her. And when she didn't live up to that, he's like, I'm done with this. I'm bored. Moving on." And then, but she's like completely bonded with him, and so is really devastated. Um, but so the remorse that happens afterwards, is in the book some, is in the movie some too. Um, and then Lord Henry kind of poo poos on that. Um, so maybe now leading into like how the ending works. It did seem like a significant theme that like tried to be a theme for Dorian, where it's like the last remnant of his humanity, his good humanity, is this capacity to feel grief or remorse or regret for things that he's done, and he feels it early on over Sybil. I think in both versions, and then he both has someone like Lord Henry encouraging him to ignore that, as well as he has the opportunity to numb it out and drown it out with a lot of other things. And so he does, which again, depiction of what happens with addiction, acting out, all of that. A lot of times, a major component of that is there's pain that I want to avoid, and grief is definitely very painful. Remorse is extremely painful. Um, but then that it starts to come back toward the end, and in both versions he starts to kind of get the sense of like, I'm tired of this and I want to be good again. So here's where I'd like to hear a lot more of your thoughts on comparing the endings of them, and some of the significant differences. Because there's kind of this sense of, I want to change, and I do something that suggests to me that I have changed, I have begun to change, and then uh, in both cases he ends up dead. Um, Spoiler, sorry. What did you perceive as the major differences in how the book and the movie ended?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna be real talk honest here. I was that was the for some reason I had a hardest time like remembering that how the book ended specifically. But I remember, and I think I've already said this, is the biggest thing was like how Lord Henry ended up being kind of like the antagonist, or like the trying to be the hero to stop him, and like how this having a kid changed Lord Henry. I think in the book he was like en route to get a divorce, or he had gotten a divorce, so like his life was getting more and more lonely, and he was experiencing his own exile. And then in the movie he's like you said, he became like a family man in essence. But then the end of the movie, despite the painting being a little bit more animated, I think it was more or less the same thing happened. He stabbed the painting, and then the painting was restored, and then then he turned into the guy, and then it kind of cuts to this ending where like the painting's still evil or something, or like the eyes flash. I tried to forget about that instantly.
Yeah. Because Lord Henry's like, poor boy, who'd want to look at you now? And I'm like, who'd want to look at that at all? So
Does it show where the painting is at the end? Is it
it's
in
up in
Lord
the
Henry's house?
that wasn't clear. It's either up in Lord Henry's house or it's no. I guess it would have to be because Dorian's attic got destroyed. So I guess it's up in Lord Henry's attic. Which why on earth would he keep that? But oh well. Yeah. Yeah. So some differences there. Yes, having Lord Henry be part of the ending was a huge departure from the end of the story. So the way that I remember the ending in the book is that he's mostly by himself, and I think he's thinking about traveling, but he's mostly up in his head. I think he has a conversation with Lord Henry, but then like goes back to his rooms, and he's like mulling over this and mulling over this, and like I want to be good, and I want to you know I want to change, and blah blah blah, and then I forget exactly how he connects to I need to like destroy the painting, but he's been like aware of the painting and aware this is representing everything evil about me, and I just don't want it. I can't have it, and I hate it. I hate this part of myself. So I'm going to stab it. I'm going to destroy it, and then in doing so, it's him stabbing himself. And so then his servants come in later, and they find this hideous corpse in this beautiful painting because he's reverted. Compared to in the movie where now Lord Henry's onto him, and they're in conflict now. They're borderline enemies because now Dorian is hooking up with his daughter, and he's aware of Dorian. He now sees, oh, this is the monster that I made essentially, and now he's after my daughter, and he's like, no, that can't happen. And so, and he's interested in finding Dorian's secret, and so he acquires a key, gets up to the attic. Dorian finds out, and he runs to meet him, and they have this confrontation where Dorian almost convinces him to say, have mercy on me, because Lord Henry sees the painting, and he's like, and there's this moment where where Lord Henry might almost be that person who could say, okay, I see the real you, let's work through this. But then he also discovers Basil's bloody scarf and realizes, oh, Dorian killed Basil, and then it's all over. But then it's Lord Henry that attacks the painting, and he's like, this has to be destroyed, and he throws a lantern at it, and then locks Henry and locks Dorian in the attic, and so like lights the gas, and it's only then that Dorian starts to stab the painting, and it's like this more long drawn out thing, like the attic's in flames, the painting's on fire, he stabs it once, starts to change and pick up the burdens, and then he like stabs it again. And so this is all drawn out, and like the soundtrack swelling and super dramatic and everything. So I don't know, I felt like there's some really significant differences, but I don't know, just kind of looking at some of the ways that they adapted it. What's your take on what the different endings accomplished? Or I don't know, saying which one did you like better doesn't quite feel like the right question, but which grotesquerie did you prefer?
Well, I appreciate the refresher. I did need it. So besides Lord Henry being there, it's way different that he's trapped in there because he's forced. He's basically forced to kill himself, like because he's gonna die anyway, almost. And that's a little bit different circumstance than kind of like being driven with like this racking guilt to the way it happens in the book. Yeah, I guess that's like just a little more like haunting, or like a more horror and a little less action, Yeah,
In
that's
the
my
book.
first. Yeah, in the book, I mean, in the movie, it's more like the action pack scene of it, and then they kind of try to make it horror by making the painting more animated, I guess.
Yeah. It seems like in the movie he's not presented as a hero per se, but definitely more as like the victim. Like Lord Henry's after him, oh, poor Dorian, he's already going to die, and so he decides to go out with a bang. It's kind of the sense you get, or something, or even the fact that it's Lord Henry that makes the first move on the painting, and I feel like that really diminishes like Dorian's character and diminishes his decision to try to destroy the painting, because it's like already going to be destroyed anyway. And like he's trapped in this burning attic, so he's like kind of like, already going to die anyway. So I don't know. It kind of felt like the ending got diminished and watered down, or it didn't. It was like kind of okay, cool action, cool like tragic action, but more in the sense of like, oh, like there's this like tragic accident that happened, and um you know kind of the sense of like Dorian's past, kind of the sense of Dorian's past caught up with him. um but it was also like he got attacked, and so there's a lot of the consequence coming from outside, whereas in the book I feel like the way it was, I think, yeah, it is more haunting, and it's haunting in the way that like I don't know, and maybe this is just me, but um in movies, I mean, there's lots of death scenes. There's like the super like long drawn out sappy death scenes and whatever. But the ones that really get me are the ones where it's sudden and unexpected for the character. I mean, it could be expected for like the viewer, but if it's like unexpected for the character, and if it's unexpected for the viewer, and it's just like a sudden, like the unexpected like sniper shot to the head or something, or the like unexpected car bomb, or the like just like oh wow, like this character didn't know that they were going to die like really quickly, like right away, and like there's no build up to it. Like those sorts of deaths are like the ones that really get to me. And I don't know, I think that like comes out of like me, I don't know, in my real life, thinking a little bit about like death and existential stuff a little bit more, and being like, um well, in my tradition, in my spiritual tradition, like there's a lot of, I mean, we talk about death a lot, and we talk a lot about like you use your life to prepare for death. And so it's a major part of our value system to be actively preparing for death and reconciling and repenting and all of that stuff. And how great to have lived a life preparing for that, and how sad to have not had any time to prepare for that. And so in the book, I feel it's like, here's Dorian, who is kind of like just kind of blithely being like, oh, I'm gonna avoid more consequences because I've avoided consequences all my life, and I'm gonna get away with more stuff because I'm Dorian Gray. And yeah, this painting can't exist, and I just want to like get rid of this part of me, and like has no idea what's going on, and has no idea what's going to happen when he tries to like sever his soul from himself. And so the fact that it's quick, it's sudden, it's unexpected, he's not ready for it. Like he's lived this really lecherous past, and he hasn't done anything to resolve it, or prepare it, or prepare for death, or fix anything, and he just has to suddenly take on the full brunt of like all of his burdens. Like that's staggering, like that's horrifying, that's a strong ending. And yeah, you don't get that in the movie at all. So there we go.
Yeah. On this podcast, have you talked about the book The Great Divorce before?
We did. That was actually our first series.
Okay. I haven't heard those episodes yet, but the thought came to me when you were talking about like preparing for death, and how I think the book really just shows in sort of a way that I felt when I read The Great Divorce, that like he's, you know, kind of like accepting that he's going to this hell that he's made, and it's just like he's like ready to go there, I guess. And it's really sad and like a lonely in the way that C.S. Lewis makes hell out to be. And then in the movie, we have the flames, and like Henry's like almost lashing out in protection of his daughter. It's just a much different dynamic, and sort of like even just in a material versus spiritual sense, he's like still wrestling with Dorian in the material world, while the spiritual painting is still there, and then the book is just more of a departure towards this lonely suicide, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the movie, it's presented more as a suicide, and in a sense, Dorian still trying to control his reality, even if it's like, okay, so I have to go now, but I'm going to do it my way, or I'm going to do it. I'm going to die on my terms, even if I have to die. Whereas in the book, I mean, technically it's a suicide because he kills himself, but it's an accident in a sense, or it's him trying to control his life and to control his fate, and then all that gets turned on his head, and he can't, and something else controls him instead. Which, if you're not aware of that stuff, not ready for that stuff like that, that gets pretty scary pretty fast. Yeah, so that's the film. The Colin Firth, Ben Barnes, let's see, Ben Chaplin plays Basil. There's Fiona Shaw, Rachel Hurdwood. There's a couple. I actually thought the movie was really well cast. Everyone did really well, presented everything really well. So that was good. But yeah, that's the film. So, other question. So, would you show this to your kids? And at what age, and or not, or why or why not, and at what age?
I think it's an easy answer. Not a kid film. But yeah, I would show my kids the film probably like in high school, maybe in the construct that we're discussing it, where it's like, hey, let's read the book and then like watch the movie and then talk about it constructively. But there's a lot of nudity.
There's a lot of nudity.
And it's a complex movie and book, like morally, to kind of like to suss out too. It's like not, I don't know. I guess it depends on the age of the kid and their kind of emotional maturity and spiritual maturity.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, definitely not a kids movie. I looked it up. It's rated R, so you shouldn't play it for young kids anyway. Yeah, because and I almost get the sense because there's so many complex themes in it. Like I wouldn't consider it entertainment. Like I wouldn't consider the movie like an entertaining movie. It's more of this is a movie with a point, or it's a movie that's an adaptation of a book, and the book has a point. So yeah, because like I feel like I wouldn't, knowing what's in the book, I wouldn't necessarily watch the movie for an adventure or for a drama. And I feel like that might be where the movie makers, I mean, that's like movie maker land. Like they have to like make it entertainment, and so they're like, well, what is entertaining about the story? Can we make it kind of an action flick? Can we make it kind of a horror flick? Can we make it more of like a drama? And there are all of those elements in the story in the book, but the book is, yeah, like you said, it's much more a moral dialogue or a moral discussion, or there's huge philosophical, spiritual, moral themes, ethical themes that go into it. So in a sense, it's not entertainment, but it's an entertaining discussion around really, really important topics, or topics with a lot of gravity. So I would say, yeah, I would. I absolutely will have my kids read the book, probably later high school, because I think it's really valuable to think about, and in a really, really well written story. I might let them discover the movie in adulthood at their own pace, because I mean, at that point it's like whatever. But I definitely want them to read the book first, and not till they're substantially older. I mean, my oldest is almost 10, so I'd say at least 6 or 7 years from now would be when he could grasp what the book is about. So
Unfortunately, I feel like I recommend to everyone read the book first, definitely on this one.
Yep. Well, there you have it, folks. Two dads recommending and giving advice about stories, because we actually read the story and watched the movie, so that gives us some credibility there.
Yeah.
So
the book isn't always better, but 99% of the time.
Yeah, that's true. In this case, I'd say, I guess the most fair thing to say would be they're completely different experiences. Like you think more. I mean, you feel a lot when you read the book. You're definitely left with a lot to think about. And I think like watching the movie just leaves you feeling raw. But again, because there is so much sensual spectacle, you can kind of you feel the impact of that, or I feel the impact of watching that much more than, oh wow, here is this like, you know, spiritual conundrum going on from the movie. Whereas with the book, I was very much like, oh wow, that's spiritual principles. I mean, listen to our podcast. I just like, you know, had a field day with all of like the spiritual and counseling and trauma and addiction themes that were in it. So all that to say, it's a decent flick if you like like that sort of thing. I guess that's it then. I guess we'll wrap that one there. Or what do they say in the movies? That's a wrap. Or okay, it's too late it's late, and I'm trying to make dad jokes. So somebody stop me there before I launch into the puns.
We'll fix it in post.
Okay, sounds good. Cool. Well, thank you, dear listener, for reading and watching along with us. If you opted to watch the film, if you were scandalized, we'll let's blame Oscar Wilde. Joel, where can you be found on the internet if people wanted to get a hold of you or read your poetry?
You can find some of my my book and my professional writing services at www.joelhere.com, and you can find additional poetry on Instagram, handle at Joel Here. That's JOELHERE. Please give me a follow.
Yeah, I do follow and like. They're really, really lovely poems. And if you would also follow me at patreon.com/MosesBernabe, also at Instagram at MosesBernabe. I'm enjoying building this community on story, on reading, on writing, and I would love your rates and reviews and shares as well. So thank you all. And if someone offers to paint your picture, run away really fast. All right. Good night, everybody. Word and Journey is a podcast by Moses Bernabe. If you like what you hear, consider supporting the show with dollars, reviews, or shares, or all of the above. Word and Journey can be found on most major podcast platforms and on my author Patreon at patreon.com/MosesBernabe. Moses Bernabe can be found at mosesbernabe.com. Contact info for my most excellent co-hosts can be found in the liner notes. The podcast logo was designed by TJ Todd, with additional development by Moses Bernabe. The theme music is by Aaron Esparza. This episode was mastered by Breakfast Puppies. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.